Hello, everybody. Welcome in. Happy Friday. It's 11 o'clock. It's looks like we might have a surprise guest here. Ooh, we have Hans, we have Noah, and we have Jason. Who could Jason be? Who could? Oh my God! Ah, I am so scared. Welcome in, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. Make sure you can hear us okay in the comments. Make sure you can see us okay in the comments. Let us know where you're from, where you're tuning in from. We always have an amazingly international audience. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. This last week has been very busy, very, very busy. A lot of stuff to talk about. But let's just go around the panel and see how everybody's feeling. Let's start with Jason, because Jason, obviously, he's had a very special guest today. How you doing, Jason? How's everything?
I am very, very good today. I think, by the way, just to get it out of the way, I would be the perfect successor to Elon at Tesla. I would or I could be the CEO forever, number one. And number
Nice.
two, I will aggressively protect the rights of Tesla and Tesla shareholders.
Jason, when I saw you in those awesome movies you took part in, that's literally the first thought that came to mind. I'm like, man, this guy would be the perfect Tesla CEO. My goodness. Noah, long time you haven't been on the community forums. Thank you so much, man, for coming back. How you been? How's everything
Happy
going?
to be back. No, things are going great. I'm super happy, super stoked about both major events this week with Neuralink and then obviously the semi delivery. So yeah, 1,000-volt architecture is the highlight for me. Like I'm a Cybertruck reservation holder, so I'm excited about that and want to hear the panelists' thoughts about that. And then I'm also curious to see if we got any sort of underground numbers as far as the delivery numbers to Pepsi, because they didn't announce that, I don't think, officially. So we'll see where the conversation goes.
Awesome, man. Yeah. And then Hans, you're on these every week, bro, and we love having you on these
Yep.
because you had such good insight. How you doing?
I love being here. Yeah, it's been a crazy week. Excited to get down and talk about Tesla with y'all today.
Heck yeah. And I think that's the perfect segue for me. So, like, how nice did it feel to not necessarily talk much about Twitter or Elon or some of that stuff that obviously is front of center and we can't ignore. We have to address and talk through it. But how did it feel to finally have a week in what seemed like a really long time where the sort of call it the community or the sort of cultural sphere of what people are paying attention to Elon was centered around the technology and was centered around the engineering. How do you guys think about that? Because that to me was the biggest standout for this week. What do you guys think? Who wants to take that first? Nobody.
I just think
no.
Yeah, I completely agree. There's all these distractions, and for me, it's like I feel like we're almost like trying to keep our head down, and people are throwing rocks at us or something, in the sense of like all the distractions and all the smack talking that happens with Elon and everything else, and it's like just shut up, keep moving forward, and then something like this is just like putting points on the board, like just amazing wins, and then also like to have something that has been delayed so long and if people just speculating like, oh, it's not a real thing, like this is just proof in the pudding of it's all coming together. So.
Yeah, great point. Yeah, it's go ahead, Hans.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I completely agree, especially because the semi has been so long in coming. We've known that it was just delayed because of the supply of batteries, and so it says really good things about where Tesla's at in their product roadmap for them to begin deliveries now, and then excited to see it. Also, I'm really excited to see as they're delivered. I'm sure we'll get a lot more updates on technical specs that they didn't really share with us in the presentation. And I'm sure there will also be some fleet operators or people making the case to fleet operators publicly that are sharing, hey, what are the economics of operating a fleet of Tesla semis? And that's going to be really exciting to watch for.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to the first YouTube channel that pops up with either a fleet operator or a driver that's like using Tesla semi and they're using like real world, like it's a perfect tool for a content creator to have a Tesla semi right now. And I think through that outlet we might get a lot of information.
Yep. Where you at, Xander?
Yeah, I was.
Xander, where is he? Oh, I don't get it. Go ahead.
Xander is the retail shareholder who ordered a semi. He's on the Cyber Bulls episodes that
Oh,
Tessa
okay,
Herbert
okay.
does. And so yeah, he's got one on order. When he gets it, then we'll get the content.
Gotcha. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, so I thought it gave me a breather. It reminded me of the last presidential election, and kind of just hoping that things would be calm. I really didn't care what happened, honestly. I just wanted things to be calm. And that event last night that reminded me of that, kind of brought it down. And what occurred to me also is I would like to have those events in the morning. Why not let it ride during the stock day as opposed to after stock hours? Because on the West Coast, when you start at 5 o'clock, the market's closed. After market's closed too. I'd like to see it done at 9 o'clock in the morning, West Coast time, and let the market react to the whatever they see. And then the other thing I was thinking about, reason why because I thought it was, I loved it, but I thought it was somewhat amateurish, the event itself, which was fine, by the way. But I wondered maybe perhaps the reason why there wasn't a bunch of information disclosed is perhaps there's NDAs signed between Pepsi and Tesla. And maybe Tesla, because they want to get out these products, have a special arrangement with the first deliveries to Pepsi. And maybe they're below market and maybe they don't want to disclose that information. So maybe that's why they kind of talked about technical details somewhat, but not really the specifics of the numbers, the deliveries, the pricing, etc. That's what occurred to me.
Yeah, I think it would make sense to deliver the MVP, minimal viable product, in the sense of, like, if they delivered all 100 that were on pre-order, then the quality control might not be as good, and then they have a lot of different things that could go wrong across the board. Whereas if you only deliver a couple of those, they could basically be those alpha tests of the whole production, and then basically, I think it's I hate to say it's a Bill Gates quote, but when you scale production, you magnify its weaknesses or its flaws, right? And so the same thing would essentially happen if you delivered all of them. You would have issues across 100 models, where if you delivered, say, 3 or 4 or 5, then you only have a small handful of things that you can correct for those other 95 that you deliver. So I'm curious to see it. I bet you it's only a handful that they actually delivered, but to me, it makes the most sense that it's a low number.
And then on pricing specifically, there was a comment that I saw on Twitter that for these early ones where a fleet operator is also going to have to incorporate some significant mega charger build out to support their fleet, then the pricing is not really just the truck. Like, there's a lot more that goes into all that, and it could all be rolled into a single contract price too. So there may not be a whole lot of clarity on the exact price of the semi itself in all of that.
Yeah. I also found what at least it occurred to me that what I was most fascinated by, to be honest, was the Tesla's use internally of the product. That Sparks to Fremont route that they talked about. I thought that's really fascinating because we have two kind of different avenues. One is obviously you want it to be profitable outside, but internally you could dramatically cut costs and increase margins that way. And it's kind of like out of thin air, because it doesn't, it's in essence creating another robot in a way as a truck, and using that to lower your supply costs, transportation costs, etc. On the other thing that occurred to me was, and I looked this up afterwards, to run a truck per year, like a single truck, owner operator, it's going to cost approximately $200,000 a year. And of that amount, depending on fuel costs, it varied. Like in 2021, fuel costs ran about 23% of the total costs. And in 2022, they ran about 38% of the total costs, obviously reflecting increase in fuel costs. Maintenance was about 10%. Insurance, which I think nobody's discussed, was 6%. And I was just thinking all those items, fuel costs obviously would be dramatically reduced. The maintenance costs would be dramatically reduced. Tesla insurance riding the trucks would dramatically reduce insurance costs. And so I saw some quote from Elon where he thought per mile he could get it down to $1.25 per mile. And when they're figuring out the total calculation of the price, it's running about 120,000 miles a year, 100,000 miles where they're loaded, and about 20,000 when they're not, when they're coming back from routes. And the estimate is about $2. It's costing them about $2 a mile to do that. And Elon's talking about $1.25. So we were talking about pricing, how you price it. I mean, if I'm Pepsi and I could save, 30% on transportation, that's going to be a huge number. And that's going to be reflected in the ultimate sales price. Notwithstanding the fact internally, you're going to have a number much below that. You don't have to, theoretically, you're ultimately going to run these as FSD with no drive. I mean, that's the way I see it. FSD, no drivers. That saves you about another 25% in costs. That's going to be a dramatic profit and margin upgrade. So that's kind of what occurred to me.
Yeah, it also makes me think about like if they're too cheap or inexpensive, they're losing out on revenue and profits, right? But if they're too expensive, then they might be losing out on market, and getting conversion. Even though Tesla has a huge brand and there's already a lot of movement towards that, so I think they have to find that sweet spot between the two. And then obviously because the event was 5 years ago when it was announced, the pricing today obviously has changed, even though it's not a publicly stated thing. And what you just outlined, Jason, is awesome information. I'm going to definitely rewatch those numbers because those are really good insights.
Yeah, I can tell you the other part of this too, the internal use of this technology of the semi is it could even go further than that, than just a pure savings play from transportation costs. So what do I think of a semi? Really what it is, it's a mobile warehouse, right? It's a thing that's pulling a trailer that is, I don't know, X number of square feet with some 9 feet or 8 feet of clearance high, but it's basically a subset of a warehouse or a subset of a space that's going to utilize that product eventually. What's stopping Tesla from utilizing the semi internally to essentially propagate their all the parts, all the supply, everything they could use for production, service, or whatever, and then it's instead of making these warehouses all over the place, or these factories, or things where they have to secure product and move it from one place to another, you now have a network essentially on the entire globe that you have literally just in time inventory everywhere, and you own that entire process. That for me is the most exciting thing about using the semi internally, because now you're positioning yourself in a place where you can probably double or triple your total square footage capacity by the number of semis you have on the road for internal use. And you'll have those things where they need to be at all times. And so fleet management becomes a very big variable to ensure that gets done. But from a physics standpoint, literally there's nothing stopping you from doing that. And so the implications of that are completely nuts, because the biggest bottleneck when it comes to production or service or anything, it's always supply chain. It's always like, can we get the supply where it needs to be? If you have mobile warehouses freaking everywhere driving themselves, you've just solved a giant bottleneck for your processes. Yeah.
Yeah, that reminds me of something that I was thinking about last night while we were on the stream. Also potentially could revolutionize their mobile service. That if you have a platform that's that large that you can transport all your parts in, that you could basically drive around and do things that you would actually have to go to a service center in currently, you could actually do those on a semi in a workshop that's in the trailer. I don't know if that would work. We were talking about the difficulty of servicing semi itself. It would be really interesting to see if they could ever do that, where they could have mobile semi service. I don't know if that'd be possible or not, but it'll be curious to see how that plays out.
Yeah. Looks like producer wife just pulled up a video from the Tesla account. Elon Musk just retweeted this, I guess. And it's the Tesla semi driving 500 miles fully loaded on a single charge. This was a snippet. Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Yeah. So just so we understand geography, and I think Noah would understand it too, since we're both probably within 45 miles of each other. When you're going from Northern California to Southern California, which was that 500-mile route, when you're driving through the San Joaquin Valley, which is pretty flat, that's going from north to south. At the base, at the end of the San Joaquin Valley, you go to there's a grade, and you have to climb that grade, and that grade is pretty steep. So, and it probably goes to an elevation of approximately 4,000 feet, and then you kind of come back down, and you eventually level off and you go south. But that's quite a pull for a truck. I mean, I've driven that, and it's pull for a car. So I was very impressed with that particular route because I did not think that was like a gimme route. They obviously could have found some route downhill. You could have done a Nicola if you wanted to do that. But I thought that was a real challenging route. So I was impressed by that 500 miles.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they just opening up a can of worms here. Rethinking about like essentially how space in general can be reused. Like to Farzad's point about warehousing and like having stuff brought, opening your square footage and having that mobility to bring your warehouse or your workshop to somebody, or auto repair, like Hans just said. There's retail space, there's event space, which I'm in, so there's just a whole set of businesses that could probably stack on top of this technology that I don't think has been discussed yet. So that's exciting.
Yeah. 100% agreed. Go ahead, Hans.
Especially if, yeah, it is autonomous. Like if you can tell your truck, hey, go, set up here and then go set up there and then go set up there. I mean, that it definitely is going to be just like the App Store created a whole new set of business model opportunities on top of the iPhone platform. Something like this can actually do the same thing for physical real world business models.
Yep.
And you're talking about also that you have these little mini power plants scattered throughout the world. And, they could service anything that requires power.
Yep. It's very true. There's so many different use cases. I mean, we've heard people about turning them into mobile RVs. Like now you have this. You need a Class 8 license to pull it, but that's an application. So I do think for the first, we had Corey from Monroe Live. Again, thank you if you're watching this, Corey. Thank you so much for making the time to come on. That was a treat. That was really a treat to have somebody of his expertise come on and sort of share his thoughts. The one thing that I took away from his take was that the current version of the semi truck is not necessarily a replacement for those long haul overnight trucks, right? There he is, Corey. Thank you again. Make sure you go follow him on Twitter. Producer wife is just getting so good at this, man. What a beast. Corey Steuben, president of Monroe and Associates. Basically, Sandy and Corey are the masterminds behind Monroe. And what I'm trying to figure out, and I don't know if this is something producer wife can find out in the background while we're talking about this, is what percent of total truck traffic, like you think about movement of goods, is tied to that long haul overnight sort of use case where you need a bed and you need, I don't know, 1,000 miles of range or something to that extent to make it happen, versus every other semi traffic, let's say in the United States, right? Because if that long haul solution is 20% or even 40%, then the semi still has a giant market that it can capitalize on in the, say, medium to even long-ish term, because it's going to take a really long time to quote unquote replace that transportation segment. But then by the time they've penetrated that market, they very well could also be in tandem be working on a solution that's going to be for a very long haul sort of trip. Or the opposite side of it could be, because it's so cheap to operate, and because it really, if you think about it, if a lot of the parts that are used to build a semi is not that expensive, what's stopping you from essentially creating making the supply chain tailored to the Tesla Semi, so you don't need long haul trucks, right? So you just have drop off points where the brand new charged Semi can just take it, boom, boom, boom. Especially with full self driving, the use case of a long haul truck becomes obsolete, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and then to take that one step further, I forgot who said it last night, but imagine all the train tracks being converted to semi truck, roadways essentially. If that's more efficient and that's better overall, like that's a huge infrastructure question. To Farzad's point of like, what if we rethink the fundamentals of transportation and how that works, and how the current structure is based off of diesel trucks driving on highways, but what does that look like? If Boring Company or the trains are the tracks are converted over. So lots of opportunities for sure.
Yeah.
What struck me when I heard it, and I heard that comment, I thought he was great, by the way, and that was really interesting when he came on. One was when they said you could stand up in the truck, fully stand up. I thought that was impressive. But when he made that comment, when I was listening to that comment when he talked about the long haul trucks, and I thought, wow, with Tesla's amazing technology, could they figure out a way to make a bed? I didn't think that was like
Yeah,
a
it's not
great
necessarily the bed that is the problem there. It's just the ability of the truck really to have that type of range. So if they're going to make a sleeper cab truck, they need one that instead of having 500 miles of range, it needs to have more like 750 or 1,000. And so it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to create a sleeper cab that doesn't have the range that they normally get in those semis.
Well, my question is, if it's a union job, don't they have to stop anyway? So isn't it a question of just charging? So if you provide the charging network, I would think if you can only drive 10 hours, whatever you can drive, and then you have to take a break because it's required by law, and you could charge, and there's a bed, I don't see the issue. I think it's a charging issue, not a bed issue. And also, I think it's a cultural issue too. I think there are truckers who like that lifestyle, who like to sleep in their truck, who like to be on free spirits and traveling around. And it's not necessarily a business requirement. It's more of a lifestyle choice. And I think Tesla could accommodate that. That's my feeling.
Yeah. But I think again in the like medium to long term, this is where it gets super hairy and like super weird. Because if you have full self-driving semis, why do you need to cater to the driver? Right? This is where in my head I'm like, okay, this is where this is where my concerns start to rise up around this technology. If within 3 years Tesla has figured out full self-driving and they can set it up again so that you have this handoff process where the semi, drops off a container at a predetermined location after 500 miles, then a fully charged semi picks that sucker up, drives it another 500 miles, and you just chain that up for the whole country. Boom, you don't need anything else. And then the form factor of the semi changes completely so that my buddy that used to work at Tesla, him and I worked together. He was like, "Why even have a semi? Just make trailers that drive themselves." At that point, why do you need the pull? Just make the trailer itself drive itself. Like that makes sense, right? Make the floor of the trailer all batteries, and then make the front of the trailer more aerodynamic, and then that becomes your solution. You don't even have to worry about the driver. So the longer term implications are so strange. Can you pull up that comment again, producer wife, real quick? What about no passenger seat? Long hauls get 2 drivers sometimes. One drives, one sleeps. Yeah, that's the current solution for sure. That those tandem trucks, you have 2 drivers so that you can pull the trailer at all times.
There is a second seat in the semi. It's just not side by side. It's kind of back behind the corner.
Yeah, and so Farzad's point too, if you're rethinking the cab itself and how that's designed, why not make that cab a control room for multiple semi trucks, right? So you can basically have connectivity. So if you're driving or in the cockpit, you could also be parking, say you're in charge of 10 or 20 different fleet trucks. And so now that you're in an autonomous vehicle, you're traveling with it, you can also connect and do the last, 5% of the trip or 3% of the trip that may not be capable, at least in the short term, of full self-driving, like those hard specific parking maneuvers or whatever it could be. I mean, parking maneuvers might be the easier part of it, I don't know. But then also to extend the thought of like redesigning the cab, like we said, for sleeping or for extra people, redesigning the trailer itself. I think if I heard correctly, they're like between 12 and 17,000 pounds. So maybe that could be redesigned to be lighter, lots of opportunities again.
Yeah.
And I was going to say I'm sorry.
No, please.
But I was going to say from a cultural standpoint, you just can't do it fast. You can only impose on what you control. So Tesla could do whatever they want internally, right? We could run empty trucks. We could try everything we want internally, but you can't impose it culturally on Pepsi. And the way we could see, it takes a long time to change attitude. And if you go full bore at right from the stop, that you're going to encounter huge resistance. So I think you got to kind of gradually change. You got to show how it's valuable, and then you got to introduce people slowly, and eventually you're going to reach the point where everybody gets it, and then you can then move much faster. But to advance like we would like things to advance, it's just going to piss off people and get pushed back and probably ultimately slow down what we want to accomplish.
Yeah, it's that S curve versus like a jump, right? Some people argue that about the grid and having electric cars in the grid. Like the argument, the illogical argument was around like, well, what if everything was electric today? The grid wouldn't support it. It's like it's an S curve. It's not a jump curve. Like you're not jumping to everything being electric all of a sudden. So the specific circumstance you're bringing up is irrelevant because that's not physically possible. But to your point, like it's going to slowly take adoption over time. In the short term, they're going to be catering to those drivers, but over time, it's going to be less and less. And frankly, I know lots of truck drivers. It's not a healthy lifestyle. It's not good on the body to work those kind of hours and to travel the way they do. I think the life expectancy, correct me if I'm wrong, I think is like the 50s or 60s. Like it's not a great life for the truck drivers. It's a hard life.
Yeah, and it was curious that Tesla specifically kind of geared the event last night towards making the truck feel appealing to drivers specifically. So, I don't know, different people are going to interpret that different ways, but it seems like for the near term that Tesla is definitely keeping drivers front and center in their thought process.
Oh, man.
It might be fun.
Sorry, let me just read this real quick. I'm sorry. So we were talking about life expectancy for truck drivers. This is from this is the CDC, I guess. As you said previously, the average life expectancy of truck drivers in the United States is 61 years old. This is less than average and generally comes as a result of a combination of factors that are related to the environment of the road, but also the lifestyle that comes with trucking life. I mean, you're sitting most of the time, obviously, and you probably can't find really good, food and routes to wherever you're going. I'm sure, those truck stops, I don't see, when we're used to drive through the country from time to time, you're not finding the healthiest choices, right? But it's still a very fascinating. I have more thoughts about it, but go ahead. No, I didn't.
Oh yeah, no, it's all good. I mean, I would love to see an option for a stand sit type desk in the semi truck. I know that's probably never really been done before, but we're rethinking things here. I think that from a health perspective might be a huge opportunity. Because the truck is electric, there could be a fridge with more healthy food opportunities. When you're on the road, there's a lot of junk food. You're not eating, healthy greens and smoothies all the time. You're eating junk food, on the road. So there's definitely a lot of health opportunities there for drivers.
The Tesla mobile semi gym. That's a new product.
But the way I think about that though is like if the driver has the ability to stay healthy while quote unquote. So let me rephrase it. Are you envisioning these types of solutions to be done while driving or while they're resting? Like how? because the while driving part renders the driver obsolete in my head. So I'm like, if you can offer a solution where they can keep healthy while they're driving, like, okay, so they're not really driving. You're just creating a space for somebody to just, it's like you're gamifying the experience. It's not really necessary to have the driver there. So how are you thinking about that?
Yeah, I kind of see two major categories. It's the RV community where it's more of a leisure drive. So they're more about the destination rather than getting paid to go there. And then there's the commercial side of it, right? Where you do have the truck driving industry as a whole. And that's more about obviously getting the job done. And I still feel like, at least over time, the percentage of tasks that a self-driving vehicle can do is obviously pretty high right now, and then over time that's going to diminish. But there's still going to be that extenuating circumstance, that little short small percentage that needs to be taken care of. But to address your current point about like, are those functions the gym or sleeping or what have you, are those active things when you're driving versus like available things when you're parking? If you look at like we've talked about before, I think it's 8 hours you need a 30-minute rest, and after 10 or 11 hours of driving you need a 10-hour break. So it's more about the off times that the gym and those other features would be available. And then specifically when you're driving, it's the stand sit thing might help with a health concerns as well. And maybe there's other ways health science folks can jump in to help us with this ideas around this, but like to try to offset the 10 hours of sitting and the health effects of that, there are the decline from health from doing those kind of things. But it's just something I feel like people haven't talked about before, and it's really cool to dive into that.
Yeah.
I was going to say, ultimately, from the big picture, Tesla has an opportunity here, because ultimately we have to get rid of truck drivers and all those kind of tasks that can be replaced. But those people have to find alternative jobs or alternative sources of income. And I know Tesla at one point in time, or Elon was talking about building a university in Texas, or there was talk about it, a tech industry. But why not, instead of that, in terms of industries that they're in effect, the goal is to get rid of the employees, why not establish training programs for it prospectively? So for now, so we'll give truckers a break. We'll train truckers to do alternative careers and do this over time, and start a program where we're basically helping people switch. And not only will it be productive, but it'll give good PR to Tesla. And ultimately, that's going to be the issue. We're going to have to get people to switch. So why not be part of the solution? If we're going to promote it, why not be part of the solution too?
Yeah, that's a very fair point. Go ahead, Hans.
This is a specific topic that Andrew Yang kind of built his platform on, and truckers are the group that he sees probably being disrupted next. And he and Elon have discussed this at length together. It is a great question, but the one pushback that I have on this, and I raised this last night in the stream, I think there's a very real possibility that we will end up going to a platoon model instead of just fully autonomous. And so there will be a driver that's assigned to a group of trucks. And if we do get to the point where the cost of transporting freight by trucking platoon is lower than the cost of transporting freight by rail, the demand for overland truck just basically skyrockets to the point where even if you have, say, 2 drivers for 10 trucks, that you still have a demand for drivers that is equal to or greater than the demand for drivers today. And we still get, so it's almost like you get your cake and you get to eat it too. Then the people that are disrupted are the train engineers and all the railroad people, which is a much smaller workforce, but it is it's a very critical piece of infrastructure today. So I don't know. That's the thing that I keep wondering about, is if we keep thinking about these things as wholesale disruptions that will completely eliminate things. And I wonder if the business opportunities that are being opened up basically make the technology additive and not necessarily subtractive.
Yeah, that's a whole new industry that could be sprouted out of this is like caravan rail. Obviously, caravan on the highways as well. But I'll reference an old MythBusters episode where they did aerodynamics of like trailing an 18-wheeler. And essentially, they increased their efficiency. I think it was like close to 30% or something, the closer and closer it got. But obviously, there was um, a a fall off essentially because of safety they couldn't get so close, but with self-driving, imagine having a fleet of 30, 40, 50 semi trucks on the rail system, like obviously replacing that. And then not only that, you can travel that distance. They could literally drive off the tracks onto the road to do that last mile delivery, like, so you could be eliminating lots of processes, lots of steps. There's rail yards there that essentially don't need to be there anymore. The unloading and loading of those big, storage containers don't need to be there. Like, so there's a lot of things there that could be changed as well.
And if in fact Tesla bot is in effect FSD, because I guess the setup is the same, then what do you need a person? Why can't you just have Tesla bot drive if it's FSD and Tesla bot is that, then I think you can eliminate a lot of those individual jobs.
Yeah.
Especially for unloading and loading, like you can have the Tesla bot do that last 3 or 5% of those tasks that a physical driver may be there for.
I think it'll come down
Right.
to a matter of liability there, though. Still, I mean, do you want the bot to be responsible for this 80,000-pound missile hurtling down the road at 75, 80 miles an hour, and all of the negative consequences that potentially arise from that? So, and especially then if you have a train of those things, I'm not so sure that we'll get to the point where that is just completely autonomous, unless Tesla's really, I mean, it's definitely a step change in functionality of FSD. It's one thing to keep a car from crashing into anything ever using the occupancy networks and all of the technology that Ashok's been working on. That's one order of magnitude of a challenge for a car. It's definitely another order of magnitude for a semi, and then even beyond that for a platoon of semis.
Yeah.
And what I was going to say is that if we look back 20 years ago, things are quite different. And I'm sure 20 years from now, when maybe this will be a relevant discussion, because I don't think it's going to happen, immediately. I think the world is going to be such a different place that we can't comprehend what it's going to be like. And so things that today sound crazy are going to be standard, and our view will be different. We'll have a different view of the future that will think of things that we can't believe, but those will occur too. So anyway.
For sure. I kind of had a curious question for the panel about, do we feel like semi trucks will grow faster as a percentage because it's a commercial application, or the adoption of cars will grow faster because it's already got more momentum?
As a percentage, I mean, I think that's an interesting question. It all depends. Like, the way I think about it is, what is the production capability of Tesla versus like in those two areas and other manufacturers. Tesla's really the only one that's building a pure electric semi, from the sounds of it. Every other, say, new wave of manufacturers for that industry are mostly hydrogen focused, right? In some sort of alternative. So I think the question needs to be framed around, what is the ultimate type of solution you're trying to push forward? And if we're saying just electric, then for the near term, the semi is going to grow way faster from a percentage basis, because it's going from 0 to 1, and that's an infinite growth. So just from that perspective, it's going to be the semi is going to take it. Now over time, the interesting thing is what's going to become a more valuable thing for society, the transportation of goods or the transportation of people. Those two sound really important, very, very important. But if we're going more to a digitized world where the transfer of goods, like you getting the product come to you, is better than you going to the product, then the transportation of goods probably will be a bigger market than the transportation of people. If it gets to the point where the cost of doing that becomes so cheap, and like I'm thinking about it through the lens of the United States, right? But this is a global phenomenon, and that's one thing we can't sort of forget, is like this could be applied anywhere. So half of the world, 4 billion people right now, don't even comprehend what the hell's going on in a lot of these developed nations with the technology, because they don't have exposure to it. It's not lack of intelligence or anything. They just don't see it. But if the cost of running a solution like this becomes so cheap, it's just a question of building out the infrastructure. And if building out the infrastructure means that that population all of a sudden takes a ton of benefits from having that technology, then the transfer of goods becomes a gigantic, ballooning, super fast industry. So that's how I think about it. I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts, but
Yeah, I mean, to shout out Jordan Giesecke, the limiting factor on this is definitely still going to be battery supply, though. And,
100%.
we've got to remember that one semi uses 12 to 13 long-range Model Ys worth of batteries. And so your growth rate on the production capacity of semi is going to be extremely limited compared to the growth rate in vehicle unit volume. So, and that, I think that even feeds back into the point that I was making earlier about platooning. It's going to be pretty hard to just produce enough trucks to really do a lot of platooning, at least for a little while, especially in a volume that is meaningful enough to even put a minor dent in rail.
Yeah.
It also depends on from whence you came. So I'm older than Noah by about 70 years.
We don't know that.
I grew up in LA in the 60s. And when you drove down the freeway and you tried to see the mountains, you could not see them. Literally. It was absurd. As a teenager, I would play golf and I'd walk up this little hill like 6 feet and my lungs would tighten. That was just the way it was. So for somebody who comes from that background, the environment is really important, because I experienced it. Every kid in LA area experienced it. So what I found interesting was the discussion about that the trucks were 1% of the total amount of vehicles. They produced like 20% of the pollution and 36% of the particulate matter. So it depends on what you want to focus on. If you're focusing on environmental, then it's a no-brainer. I mean, there is no question. But if you're focusing on some mixed bag of profit, other issues, and the environment, then I see why you would kind of mix it up. And I think the battery issue is the biggest issue, because it really puts a strain or a drain on your battery supply. But in terms of the environmental impacts, it's clear that the semi, and I think Elon was pretty clear about that, the semi by far has the most profound impact on the environment.
Yeah, I'll play the other side of that. I'll put on a face here and pretend like I'm the other side of that. No. So my dad is kind of the opposite of you. So he's like, doesn't really believe in the environmental change that's happening. And he thinks it's a cyclical thing and it's overblown. So even from the other perspective, I think the bottom line for me is, if the numbers show that it's more less expensive. I can't take myself seriously right now with this mask on. But if the numbers show that it's cheaper overall, like businesses, fleets, what have you, they're just going to buy into it. It's going to be that quick of a change, just like with Hertz and what they're doing with Model 3s and Ys and their commercial fleets. So I think they come to. I'm ultimately saying I'm coming to the same conclusion. Like, it's going to happen. Whether you believe in the environmental and like you're pro environmental or you're not. I think ultimately the bottom line is, if it is more efficient money wise, it's going to happen regardless.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And I love how you put on the mustache just for that message. That was freaking brilliant.
And what I was going to say is about, so I don't necessarily, not to be opposite to your father, but I don't believe necessarily that of causes. So if there's no rain, I just accept the fact there's no rain. I don't attribute that to anything. And in the end, I think, well, if we improve the environment as a side benefit, then so be it. But if there's a problem, there's a problem. So you deal with the problem. I'm not going to attribute the cause because who the hell knows? We're talking about a year or 10 years or 100 years in the life of a 6 billion-year-old planet. So this is like a blink in the eye. So who really knows? But in my view is, so, what's the downside? And ultimately, especially if it's profitable, what's the downside? There is no downside.
Yeah, that sort of overlap of it just so happens that the most business savvy decision is good for the environment is the most powerful like force for this whole thing that's happening right now with call it the renewable energy or whatever. It's just going to make way more sense to operate this type of solution in a lot of use cases from a monetary perspective, and it's better for the environment. And like there's a lot of folks out there that say, well, the mining the batteries and all this stuff has very potential bad things from a pollution perspective or whatever, but net if you look at the whole life cycle of it, there's a lot of studies that prove that that's not the case. So that's a whole different conversation, but it's that the building of momentum towards that becoming a well-known thing in society, where it's not because necessarily of the environment, it just makes sense to do, it just happens to be good for the environment, is a shift. It's becoming a shift. And as we were talking through, somebody brought up the point of, actually, Hans, go ahead, I saw you come off mute, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and yeah, that is not by accident. I know I've talked about this before, but Tim Urban, in one of his Wait But Why articles, digging into, I believe it was the chef and his secret sauce, that Elon understands that the way to create change is to create an economic forcing function that drives that change. And that's just his fancy term for, yeah, if you make the right thing to do, the cheapest thing to do, then that's what everyone's going to do. And so that was his core insight. That is exactly how he has architected both SpaceX and Tesla, is to create these massive changes in society by drastically reducing the cost of the thing that is ultimately what we ought to do.
Yeah. It's a fascinating transition. Any other thoughts around semi, or like the one thing that was going through my mind was the impact to, and this is tied to the semi, like the impact to the displacement of work, quote unquote, potentially. If there's no additive effect from the semi being launched and it creating, say, more jobs or more industry for people to take part of, and folks get disrupted, there was a thought around, hey, should Tesla be responsible for, or at least help in creating a thing where that displaced workforce has the ability to, I don't know, I hate to use the word retrain, because like people should be able to do what they want to do, right? Like we shouldn't be forcing, like this learn to code thing is like boils my blood, because it's like, okay, like this is crazy. What we should do is enable people to really pursue what they're good at and they want to do, right? So I was half thinking about this, and you guys tell me if I'm crazy. What if the way to enable a lot of folks that could be disrupted by the displacement of work through automation is for the government to purchase a bunch of Tesla stock and then Tesla stock implement some sort of dividend, and then all shareholders, i.e. the government, like the people of the United States, are now taking the dividend gets distributed to all citizens of the states. And that's like one way of creating universal basic income, quote unquote, but it's through the private sector to try and alleviate some of these things. And I'm kind of taking this a little bit different direction, but call me crazy, we can skip this topic entirely, but I was thinking about that. And maybe this is like 10 to 20 years down the road or even more. Am I crazy? How do you guys think about that?
Farzad, you're crazy.
Thank you.
It's an interesting thought exercise. if you can ignore the practicalness of it, like if we actually think it's relevant and actually going to happen, like put that to the side and just think of like, say this happened in the future, that's interesting. I mean, it's another way of interpreting or thinking about universal basic income, and how that would look or be structured. Um, I don't know how to, without putting it bluntly, like I don't want the government to have any sort of anything. Like the less is more, with in my opinion. But yeah.
Okay. Go ahead, Hans. You can comment.
Yeah, practically, I don't expect to see the government ever buy Tesla stock. I like the idea of, basically ownership stake in a productive asset being something that can then pay it forward to future generations, or like also as a welfare net for society. But ultimately, so it doesn't necessarily have to be like, we don't have to wait for the government to do the right thing that needs to be done. This could also be something that Tesla shareholders band together and allocate portions of stock to that type of cause.
Yeah.
I also think that you're professing more of a European view than a view from the United States.
I was born in Spain, after all.
Yeah, yes, which is appropriate. That is in Europe, right? I think. I just used today. I think probably half the country thinks the government provides too much to people, and I think those same people would be resistant to a system where the government basically supported half the population. And you said it requires time. It requires a lot of time and a lot of change, or else I just don't see it as being possible in the near term.
Here's another thought. Like, what if there were certain things that were deemed no longer like you cannot make a profit doing these professionally, specifically around like living, like sheltering somebody, like food and shelter specifically? What if that was like rethought in such a way that no lawyers from a lawyer, sorry. What if that was rethought about what about certain sectors, in the future, if we do have robots at a mass scale that like are basically no longer, they're basically a right to humans to have food and shelter, or like some sort of minimum things? Would that be another way of thinking about universal basic income?
I think so. I mean, the way I think about it is just like, how do you maximize the chance of a human being to achieve their full potential based on how they want to achieve it? Like that's ultimately should be the goal of anything that gets implemented to fill the void, or just get to the point where people are truly able to do what they want to do and not have to fear for their welfare. But at the same time, and this is like the hardest piece of this puzzle, to also incentivize useful work and to incentivize value. And that's where this whole thing gets difficult. And I don't know why I'm trying so hard to solve for it, but I feel like, I don't know, man. Like the concept of a company that is going to create a ridiculous amount of value through automation and robotics somehow being part of the solution makes so much sense. It makes so much sense. So like, how do we make that happen? Or is that like, do we have to wait to get further into the future to be able to even realistically have those discussions? I don't know. It's a topic that's just a lot of people call me crazy for it, but it's like, I don't know. I feel like it's hard. It's hard, and it's going to be a potential gap in the near future. I don't know. Yeah. Sorry, I've just put such a huge damper on the mood here. Somebody say a joke.
Well, I was going to say something, and I think that we need better science fiction movies. I think our science fiction makes us too scared about the future. Every kind of like high tech science, I know it sounds like a joke, but I think in a way you kind of brainwash people. You repeat kind of the same message time and time. Every kind of like science fiction movie has like the bad government that is doing things to the poor population. It's everybody. And that's almost all of those big time. So let's have some new science fiction movies that show, exploration and success and positive feelings. And let's kind of put that message out. Because, I was watching like Colbert last night, and he was talking about Elon. The whole monologue was kind of like a thing on Elon. So let's get some positive vibes. Let's kind of change the trajectory of people's mind.
What was he just shitting on Elon? Like, what was he saying?
He was, yes, they were talking about Twitter. They were talking about the check marks.
I see. That's a great point. I think creating things that inspire people to look at the future in a more positive manner is probably underrated, and it could be a big piece to move us to a better future altogether as humanity. Very interesting point. Let's Q4. So we're in December now, and 2nd, and we are 29 days away from the end of the quarter. There is a lot of things that are happening with Tesla that have been going under the radar for the last couple of months because of the whole Twitter craziness. How are you guys thinking about Q4? What do you think is going to happen here? What do you guys have any predictions? There's some delivery numbers out there. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was very optimistic, and the most recent delivery numbers I saw as much as 450. I saw like a day ago, and in the range of 440 to 450. But then last night I heard on Rob's he was doing a live stream also. He said that there was some report that starting on November 28th and running through the 2nd of December, that there was a shutdown at the Shanghai plant, and had not gotten confirmation. And it was to the 2nd, so that would be today. And in the past, the way those lockdowns work, they would set a date and then they'd extend a date, whatever. So he didn't know if it was true, but if that's true and we get another reduction in production, that's going to affect the ultimate numbers. So,
was it related to COVID, or was it an upgrade to the factory?
He didn't state, but it seemed to be related to COVID. Was more the direction.
Gotcha. Yeah, the numbers that I'm seeing being thrown around is 450. I have 450 in my model to try and figure out what sort of the profitability is going to be, or the EPS and the net income. Troy Teslike is somebody that I follow very closely to get those numbers, and he has a Patreon, and he also has public information. He delays the public information by a week or two. And I don't want to sort of talk about his the private stuff, because obviously I would destroy his old model. So the last public report he had, I think he had Tesla 425 or 420 for the quarter, but that was a few weeks ago. And the thing that happened around China not getting additional incentives, yeah, Troy Teslike right there. Thank you, producer wife. Man, you're on fire. So what's his latest thing? So Tesla's production was 930,000 in 2021. The target is 50% growth this year. You can listen to here. Can you scroll down a little bit to the next tweet there? Tesla Naples, through December 31st, all new U.S. Model 3 and Model Y deliveries will receive an adjustment of $3,700 off the price of the car. Limited inventory available for immediate delivery. Reply yes. Okay, so this suggests Tesla's extending the $3,700 discount to Model 3 and Y orders in the U.S. placed before today. Okay. Interesting. Yeah, Troy Teslike, if you don't follow him on Twitter, make sure you follow his stuff. He gives a lot of information around this. But so it looks like we have a incentive for U.S. cars through the end of the year. Then we'll have the IRA kicking in January, and you have a potential shutdown in China for the last 4 days that might be COVID related or not. But it does seem like the 450 number is achievable, even given all those things. With everything that's going on, the question becomes how much profit they're going to make in these cars, because it did have a incentive what was it, the insurance option, a free insurance option in China or something that doesn't technically impact the gross margin of the car. It's just really an incentive to get the car sold where the customer gets a discount on the back end. Yeah, I don't know. I think it might surprise a lot of people. The street's at 430. The last time I saw, so that there's a lot of positives lining up for the company.
The mystery factor, I think, is that $20,000. Remember that 20,000 car that magical 20,000 that was in transit that had been produced, and I don't know if Troy accounts for that. I don't know if the inventory will significantly increase, but I did see a chart today that said at the end of the third quarter that the inventory was at its lowest point relative to production ever. So that doesn't suggest that the inventory is ballooning. But that 20,000 mystery, that might be, maybe they deliver 430 plus 20, and that would be the 450. I don't know. But I don't, that inventory amount always seemed kind of confusing to me.
They would have to unwind the delivery wave. Or sorry, they would have to actually go all in on a delivery wave in order to deliver those 20,000 cars that they produced last quarter, and then all that they produced this quarter. So if they're unwinding, then you would expect the inventory at the end of the quarter to actually grow at a point or at a rate that's basically equivalent to the growth in deliveries overall. This is the absolute number. So, maybe it's 20,000 this quarter, 22, 24, 26. That as they deliver more cars each quarter, they need a higher number in inventory at the end of the quarter in order to have the same number of days of inventory in stock. And then, as you're switching from a delivery wave model to an unwound model, you also need a higher number in inventory at the end to keep your delivery smooth. So
you're muted, Farzad. Okay. Yeah, to your point, I was going to say, so I wonder if we can calculate that, if there was 20,000 cars, was that October or was that for Q3? Like where that buffer is, and maybe we can extrapolate
it
that
would have been
percentage.
on October 31st.
For that month of October then? Because to your point, if they're
reporting the amount that they had in inventory on the day that the quarter ended. So that 20,000 number is as of October 31st.
And then do we know? I don't know top of the head. We could look it up. But how many they delivered in that quarter then?
Or I guess September. It would have been September 30th.
Okay,
is what that number would have been.
Because then we can get a percentage of essentially in transit or like buffering, cars that are essentially buffering each quarter, and then that will scale, as you're saying, towards future years. They should roughly have the same percentage unless their logistics are changing or adapting to allow more or less of that percentage over time. But that's super interesting.
And I think that the point was they're not going to deliver what they produce. So I think there's still a gap. So they might produce 460, and let's say they delivered 430, and they still had 20 plus. That's still 450. And those numbers may be wrong, but I agree. As they produce more models, they're going to have a greater number of inventory. But I still think there's room where they could do in the 440 to 450 range.
Pretty close.
No, I agree.
Pretty close to hitting what 2021 was 500K total. So almost in one quarter, roughly. That's pretty good. I wonder, kind of another trend thing of like if that will happen, over the next year, it'll match one quarter of production. And then the other trend is like I think Q4 is usually the highest production quarter every year, both from a sales perspective because people tend to buy a lot of cars towards the end of the year, I guess, around the holiday season, and then obviously Tesla's continuously growing over time.
Yeah, historically they've entered into Q4 with a surplus of inventory, and then they've actually delivered more cars than produced in Q4. So that'll be interesting to watch this year to see if they really are running into delivery bottlenecks in transportation capacity. I don't know how they would continue to do that.
I saw something recently. I think it relates to this in some way. Some of you may know Chicken Genius or the name. And so he has I guess he provides a service under a different name. So I kind of discovered that. So I got something, and he was talking about cash conversion. And he said the only three companies that have a negative cash conversion rate are Apple, Amazon, and Tesla. And in effect, what it means is you're letting your suppliers fund your operation. And so he was saying that, for example, Apple doesn't pay their suppliers for 110 days after they deliver their
That's
product.
crazy.
Yeah, so they don't need to use any of their own money, and that's why they can buy back their stock. That's why they can do dividends, whatever. And he said that, Tesla was the only other company besides Amazon that was in that. And I presume that, ultimately their goal would be to extend that period in which they can pay their suppliers. And probably as they become a bigger share of those suppliers' business, then they can make those demands as things go on. But I thought it was pretty interesting how in effect those companies finance their business without using financial institutional money, using basically the people they're buying from to fund their own business.
Mm-hmm. So that is highly dependent on growth rate as well. Your cash conversion cycle is not extremely important if you're not growing. But if you are growing and you have a negative cash conversion cycle, then it puts you in a sticky situation as a company because your cash needs are growing faster than your revenue, because you need to pay more for the future production that you have than you've got revenue coming in on the back end. But then if you can flip it around and you can have that negative cash conversion cycle to where you're paying your suppliers after you actually get paid for the product, then the faster you grow, the larger your cash cushion actually becomes. So that's a huge and extremely important factor when you're trying to grow at 50% per year on a compound annual growth rate. So that's one of the reasons why Tesla's in the position that they're in, because they probably wouldn't be able to execute the business model without doing that. My understanding is that they have pretty standard terms that, unlike Apple, where they're really throwing their weight around, I think it's just 60 days. But, if
90.
there is it 90?
Probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and even 90 is not uncommon. 100 and some is just ridiculous. But anyways, they're able to produce their cars and deliver them, get them in the hands of customers so quickly that they're still able to collect that money from customers before they're actually having to pay suppliers on the back end. So yeah, I just wanted to connect both the growth rate to cash conversion cycle. And then, yeah, I don't think that Tesla's really trying to rake their suppliers over the coals. I think they're operating within kind of an industry standard payment terms framework, even with their suppliers.
Yeah. The one variable I'm looking forward to in this sort of context of how Tesla is going to perform this quarter, like a lot of the things we're talking about here is why they create so much profit and why they're able to do what they're doing. But I'm wondering if now, if in Q4 we're going to get to a situation where, especially with like a recession that seems to be taking hold with all the actions that the Fed's doing and the other automakers, how is the rest of the car industry going to look in Q4, which is a seasonally, like Noah was talking about, sort of a seasonally high sale period for traditional auto versus a Tesla? Like, how are GM and Ford and all these other companies going to report versus previous year's Q4? My gut tells me that it's not going to be nearly as high as the previous quarter, and the growth is not going to be there because of what I feel is a general tightness from the population when it comes to spending on stuff. Like when I just talk to random people or I hear stories like so my brother has had he's trying to sell his Chevy Volt, and I'll use this as a proxy. A Volt, not a Bolt, a Volt, which is like the dumbest naming convention a car company could have came up with, because nobody really knows what I'm talking about when I say Volt or Bolt. They're like, oh, the Bolt. No, the Volt, right? So he's dropped the price multiple times and he still hasn't had anybody buy the car. And that to me tells me that people are not buying things right now nearly as much as they used to. That might be a kind of a watershed moment for some of these car companies in Q4, when they are expected to have giant sales and they don't report that. And then in contrast, you have Tesla that's likely to have another record quarter. Not likely, it will definitely have another record quarter. And then you have this, again, this widening gap between one company and the other one. I wonder if that's going to be a big catalyst for the next year. In addition to the Fed, looks like they're pivoting, right? It seems like we have a lot of catalysts starting to coalesce. But the legacy auto one for Q4, I think, is one not very many people are talking about. I believe it's going to send some shockwaves because it will be I'm predicting that it's going to be a pretty big deal. It's going to signal a lot of things. Oh my God, people are not buying nearly as. It's going to be a confirmation. I feel like all of us can feel it. Like when we're talking to people, all of us can feel that people are just spending less. Houses, have come to a standstill. No one's really buying a new car right now that I know of. My brother's trying to sell his used car and he can't. What do you guys think about that? Do you guys have any general feelings around that? Is that something you guys can confirm, deny? I would love to hear your thoughts. And the comment section too.
My understanding is specifically around used cars over COVID, the demand obviously dropped off and then it came back steadily and then went crazy for a little bit. And I think now we're on the opposite side of that swing where there's more cars and basically the overpriced used car market is starting to drop. And I think that relates to what your brother's going through right now. And by the way, I know somebody in California who's looking for a Volt with a V. So let's connect about that.
Send me.
Yeah, we'll connect about that. But yeah, so maybe it's that as far as like the bigger, broader strokes go. But I mean, the ultimate thing too, I think, is what's going to happen eventually. Sentiment around EV car adoption obviously is still like on its S curve on the upswing of that, but there'll be a tipping point, and hopefully it'll be more so when the $25,000 car is being mass produced and already in the swing of things. But there'll be a tipping point where essentially the general public will no longer want gas cars. Right now, people, I think the general sentiment that I've gotten from friends and family, people are like, they know it's there, but they don't think it's ready yet, right? Whereas we're kind of like earlier in that adoption curve, so we're already buying our Teslas and have our electric cars and are excited about it. But I think the general public, that 50% adoption rate or what have you, like they're not quite there yet, and it's really lagging because of the production, obviously, of Tesla can't get to that spot yet, and they're going to over time. We see that trend happening. But to what you're describing and talking about, I think that will really take effect, where essentially gas cars will drop significantly, even more so, because everybody's going to see that value and see that in electric cars, and see that the gas car is no longer relevant and not worth holding on to or keeping.
Yeah. Hans or Jason, any thoughts?
Yeah, I kind of agree with you, and I think that I don't know if it'll be Q4 where we really see that narrative start to shift. It very well could be, but the other thing that I'm thinking about is basically segmenting out the growth in their EV business versus their declining ICE sales. That I think that if people are looking at the financials, it's like, oh, you are growing your EV sales, but it's not very fast, and this is not a profitable part of your company. And yeah, you suffered 10 or 15% decline. The thing is, since it is Q4, I think they might get just enough cover. They might not sell as many as they would have sold in like comparative increase from Q3 to Q4 from earlier years, but they might sell enough more than Q3 to look like, hey, we had a decent quarter. It won't be as glaringly obvious how scary that was. I think it might be a little bit basically shielded, or not as easy to read in the financials this year. We'll see.
I think it'll be less than Q3. That's how bad I think it's going to be.
If it is, that would be crazy,
because that implies Q1 is going to be so bad too, right?
Abysmal.
If you really think about it. Yeah. That's what my gut's telling me. And I have no data to back it up, but that's what my gut's telling me. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I was going to say is I don't see, and I kind of agree with both Noah and Hans. I don't see anybody. Well, one, the attitude I think is wait and see. That's what I hear. People are just kind of they don't know, so they're cautious, and they're going to wait to see how it plays out. They're not like crazy, but they're cautious. And I would think the relative percentages of ICE cars to electric, the percentages will change over the next year or two. So there'll be a greater. I don't know if there'll be substantially more electric cars sold, but as a percentage of the total, it will be a greater amount. And I think anybody who's questioning whether to get an ICE car or an electric car will probably wait and eventually go electric. And ultimately, I think this will be the final nail in the coffin for ICE cars. On top of that, I was thinking about something else, because it bothers me. Not it's indirectly related to this, but it bothers me. So many people have, or at least a lot of people have negative views of Elon and how that might play on demand. And I was thinking about that, and it worries me. But then I think about it in a different way. I think of Tesla like the Raiders. That's how I kind of compare it. So there's like 50% of the country that despises the Raiders and would never buy any type of Raider memorabilia. And there's 50% of the population that would buy like 9 pennants and 8 Teslas and whatever. So you don't have to sell to 350 million. If you just sell to 175 million and they buy your stuff, that's sufficient. And that kind of gave me a little peace. So I don't have to worry, because that's the world. You're not going to please everybody. But again, it's kind of like the law of physics. To every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And in that case, that kind of gives me, makes me feel good about ultimate future demand.
Yeah, I think future demand is. I agree with you 100%. And ultimately the way I think about it is Tesla's going to have a giant cost advantage against everybody else in the next 2 years. They will have more than likely the cheapest cost per mile transportation system in the world, and robotaxi and the $25,000 car. And I don't think that can be argued. It's going to be incredibly cheap to operate on a per mile basis. And when you're starting to get into the masses, I believe that people don't give a shit about what the brand quote unquote means. Is it going to save me money? Am I going to be able to live the life that I want because it's going to free up my resources to do it? And Amazon, and is it convenient enough so that it's going to bring value to my life? The value and sort of the brand thing and this is sort of I'm evolving with this thought process. I think it's quite a I think it's in our bubble that we are very concerned about what people think about Elon and what he's doing to the brand. I think ultimately if they make the product as cost effective and as good as humanly possible, none of this matters. And literally Amazon's the perfect example. So Jeff Bezos got dragged through the mud 1,000 times over, open investigations into how shitty their warehouses are and all this other stuff. A lot of employees coming forward talking about being mistreated. Is anybody stopping using Amazon? No, not at all. And I'm not saying that it's going to be okay for Elon to fuck everything up and like mistreat everybody. That's not what I'm saying. All I'm saying is when it comes to the product itself and when it comes to mass adoption, people are cost conscious first and foremost, cost conscious second, and then cost conscious third. And then how convenient is it going to be for me 4 through 10? After that, it's like, okay, Elon's cool. Teslas are cool. I don't know. That's how I think about it. And that's why I've come to the conclusion that I'm 0% worried about the current drama that's happening around the company and Elon.
Yeah. They will virtue signal and say they won't buy it, but then they'll still buy it.
Right.
Yes, exactly.
Right. Yeah. It's funny, like people ultimately will act in their best self-interest, right? And that's the argument that's often made against capitalism, is like these few, billionaires are working in their self-interest, but that's how people work. Like Amazon, like you just said, is a perfect example of how we're going to work in our own best self-interest because it's cheaper for us, it's better for us. That's just how it works.
Yeah. And they very well mean what they say. They might say that they're never going to buy a Tesla, and it might be also corresponding to a time they don't really need a car, and it's easy to say that. And then 3 years later, their conversation changes. I'd never buy a Tesla, but it's the best car and best value, so I will.
Yeah.
And they'll hold their nose or whatever, and they'll enjoy the product.
Yeah.
Yep. For me, I just got my Model Y, and I'm been a huge Tesla fan since about 2020, and talking to my wife, and like, to me, the bottom line was the safety concern, and like having her out of a 2-door sports car, car that she got when she was 16, kind of deal, and it's kind of on its last, it's getting older. To me, it's like it's the safest car ever made, and to me, having that was the deciding factor. And yes, it's expensive. Yes, there's lots of other things that come with it. And yes, I'm a huge Tesla fan, but like, set all that aside, it's the safest car ever made. And that's why I got you that car,
Yeah. I love that comment that was just posted. My wallet made me buy it. That's like a brilliant way of putting it. My wallet made me buy it. Hans, you came off mute earlier. Not sure if you wanted to add something. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna just circle back to the Q4 thing. The other thing that I'm excited to watch for is what Tesla's EV share ends up being. That, their EV share was artificially suppressed by the lack of production in Shanghai. So as long as we don't get any funny business in the month of December and Shanghai is able to operate even at 95% of what it should, if there are no day or 2 or 3 shutdowns for COVID, that will revert and Tesla's EV share could grow. And I think a lot of the competition is coming narrative is fueled by the fact that Tesla's share of EVs dropped a little bit while Shanghai was shut down. So yeah, if not only is it not shut down, but they expanded capacity so much, it should more than offset the growth in deliveries by other manufacturers. They may actually get to a record high EV share this quarter. And what that does to the story of the stock, because that's what people like Gary Black think about and care about. If Tesla just destroys every other company in EV share, that changes the way that analysts look at the company moving forward and do their discounted cash flow models.
And that's why I want the factory announcement, because that also changes the analysis, because then they have to factor in additional capacity. And we know it appears that is imminent. I was hoping for the end of this year, but it sounds like it's imminent. And I think that will dramatically impact the valuation currently.
Yeah, I was just going to say the levers that Tesla can pull. One of the levers, if they do see some sort of diminish in demand, which I don't expect, is fleet cars, like going to Hertz and going to those other rental places and explaining the business proposition of how within a few years it'll be cheaper overall cost to maintain and own those cars. And to take that even a step further, what if Tesla created their own fleet model, right, and had a rental system around that? But going back to Jason's point a moment ago, like factories, I know there's been some open debate about where the next factory is going to be. To me, it's more of like yes and, like yes Mexico, yes Canada, yes Thailand, like all of those I think will happen over time. It's more of like lining them up and seeing which one will land where, and I think all of them will move sequentially in order, but then we'll see a pilot line happen for the $25,000 car, and then that will scale out to those other factories.
Yep. The what I keep coming back to is like, and I guess I'll use this to wrap up this topic, and then we'll open it up for Q&A if you guys are okay with it, like 5-10 minutes of Q&A. Yeah, in the comments, if you want to ask a question for the panel, type question before you comment, put it down, and then producer wife will only pick out the best, only the best. What I always come back to, especially in this environment and how beat up the stock market has gotten, Tesla's probably going to report somewhere between $4.5 to $5 billion in Q4 in net income. That's $20 billion annualized, and that's before the growth of the company into 2023, 2024, and 2025 with Cybertruck, the robotaxi, the semis, and full self-driving. So within the next 1 to 3 years, Tesla's going to be generating upwards of, who knows, $50 to $100 billion of net income per year. And that just makes it completely ridiculous. Like, I just don't understand. It does not compute anymore. Like, literally, my brain just breaks And I'm like, okay, what's happening now? So it's almost like the things that have happened recently with the stock market and how depressed Tesla has been in relation to that sort of downturn has so much strengthened the story into the next year, that if the right catalysts are aligned between the Fed pivoting, Tesla reporting really good margins and profitability, the rest of the auto industry, hopefully not, but what's probably going to happen is they're going to start really suffering. I think a flight to safety and FOMO is going to be a legitimate story for Tesla in 2023, a very legitimate story. And that's what I'm most excited about, to be completely honest. Yeah.
I 100% agree. I don't know if we'll get all of those things kind of coalescing in Q4, but we
Why
see
not, damn it?
the dominoes. It may be, but I think if you say, hey, 2023, by the end of 2023, absolutely. Like, we don't know if it's going to be this month, next month. But yeah, the Fed is not going to keep interest rates this high forever. And then we see the progress that Tesla's making on their execution. It'll just be ridiculous, especially then if we can deliver, which we should, deliver sequential unit delivery growth from Q4 to Q1, which we've only done a couple of times. Typically Q4 comes in higher than the following Q1. That I just can't imagine a world where the stock is not significantly rewarded by sometime in Q2 for all of the progress that Tesla's made on their fundamentals this year.
Yeah.
So I'll take a little bit of a different stab at that. I think that all the things that Farzad, you said, they will accomplish, but I don't think that relates to the stock. That's just the business. And, the stock and the business are operating on different paths. And I think eventually the stock will catch up to the business, but we don't know when that is. And that's what makes it so frustrating, right? So we could perform perfectly 2023, 2024, the stock could be stable. And then on January 9th, 2025, it goes up 105% one day. I mean,
Yeah.
that's how the market works. So all we can focus is on the business. The business is solid. The stock we don't control. And we have to be really patient.
The voice of
The
reason.
counterpoint to that is Gary Black. He talked about the PE is basically historic lows. It's never been this low, or the PEG ratio. I can't remember if he said PE or if it was a PEG ratio. Either one. It's basically at a historical all-time low, right where it's been. And now we see that it hasn't continued to decline, that it seems like it's kind of rebounding in a bounce off the bottom. We'll see if that continues. But if we have significant net income increases in Q4 and then again in Q1, that should, the stock price will have to move higher. Now, how much we don't know, but it will have to move higher just to maintain a historically low PE ratio. And then if we start getting rewarded with a little bit extra PE, especially a forward PE, then it should it should rise at an even faster rate.
I think the ultimate question for me is like, when will the general public see the value in Tesla like we do? And I think it really comes to when the world gets that electric cars are the future at mass scale. And like I said, I still think we're early in that adoption curve, even though we're ahead of that curve and we know it's coming and we see the writing on the wall. But percentage wise, we're still, less than 20% now. I think 2021 was 6%. We're going to hit roughly 10 or 12% this year in 2022, right? And so when that gets to 50% or more, I think that's when it will be more valued.
I don't think that it has to be the general public who gets that. I just think it really has to be institutional money managers have to get that. And I think they all already believe that electric is the future of mobility, but they see a future world in which competitors crowd out Tesla's ability to dominate the market, which is not the world that exists. There's no other competitor currently who can move fast in that. Like, it goes back to the SMR analogy. Tesla is the Usain Bolt of the EV industry, and they're way ahead of the field, and they're still accelerating. And so no other competitor will be able to come in to do that. So that's the question, is how long does it take for institutional money managers to realize that they have a 100% chance of dominating the profits of the entire auto industry for the foreseeable future?
It's a great point.
I would expect some more PE compression if we have a recession. So I don't think we're at the end. And and if we're at 200, I'm just making up numbers. If we're 200 today and we go down 20%, if the market goes 20% down more, then we're at $160. We could certainly go up. We go up 30%, we're back to 200. So you could rise, and we may rise, but it just may be a slower path to back to the all-time high. And again, I think it's independent of the business, at least for now. I'm very confident that those will meet, but I have no idea when that will be.
Yeah, that's fair. Putting a timing on it is, yeah. So 2023. I'm just kidding. Yeah, it's the overarching story, and I'll wrap this up and then we can get into Q&A here. So for me is the fear of the company, and I agree with you, like somehow the stock and the business will meet up together at some point. If it's 2023, 2025, who cares when it is? But the primary fear of a lot of these folks around competition and like Tesla's not going to be able to have the same market size. I think that what gets lost every time is that if you're able to reduce the cost per mile of that solution, then your market automatically grows exponentially. So if the net cost per mile of transportation sector through electrification cuts it in half or more, that's probably a 4x increase in the global customer base. Like, I don't know why folks don't understand that. It's so obvious. So then why are we worried about competition? Anyway, Q&A. Sorry. Did anybody want to say something before we go there?
Yeah. I was just going to say that's the thing that underlies those, people always, experts make that linear prediction into the future, and it's because they miss exactly that. Like if you're operating under Wright's law, you're actually declining your cost curve, you're growing your market as you continue to deliver more and more units. And then it turns your business into an exponential curve instead of a linear curve.
You got it.
I was just going to derail the conversation and just give props to Farzad and the team, wife producer, and what you guys are doing, because to me, like, this YouTube channel has been a find of the year for me, like 2022, like all-star status in the Tesla community, because not only is the production value awesome, which is what I love, you're building a huge community and bringing the community together. Like, you're respected by every YouTuber that I've seen come on your channel, like, and having them point back to you. It's just been a really strong, like, glue that's brought everything together. And the conversations that you have here are special for sure.
Damn, man. That's very sweet. Thank you so much. That means a lot, honestly.
I couldn't disagree more with Noah.
Good. I'm glad. I literally heard my wife laughing from downstairs after you said that. All right, let's bring up some. She said, "Shut up." Bring up some questions here. Let's go. That was so sweet. Thank you, man. That was very, very sweet. Let's pull up a question. Michael, what type of vehicle would the panel like to see? That's a very broad question. I'm assuming for the robotaxi. That's how I'm gonna take it, because that's like super broad. The way I think about it is, and I've talked about it previously, I think if they come out with a solution that really just drops cost per mile to the absolute minimum so that it becomes the cheapest transportation per mile solution in the world, then this whole electrification movement will be basically 100% secured. So if they can do that, that's what I'm most looking forward to. What about the panel?
I think selfishly, the Cybertruck, because I love my truck. I'm super into trucks. I think business-wise, because I am a small business owner, it's the Cyber van, because I need to haul equipment and stuff around. And then for the mass public, it's the robotaxi or the $25,000 model that will really create that wide adoption for EVs and Tesla's future.
Okay.
I'm going to echo what Corey said last night. Just selfishly, we have way too many kids even to fit in a Model X right now. I need the giant cyber sub.
Nice.
I think this is a softball question. It is so obvious. I was a huge Jetson fan. Obviously, it's got to be a flying car. Obviously.
Fair enough. Jason is a fan of flying cars. Next question. What do we got? Question. Tesla price at the end of 2023. What do you think? Yeah, what do you think? Yeah, we should probably not like throw out numbers out there just because, not financial advice. It's impossible to tell. I mean, I think Jason brought up, I didn't know Jason was so well versed in finance and stocks, but you don't know what the stock market's going to do, especially in the case of a recession. So for me, I don't even want to answer the question because I feel like I don't know if it brings value. What do you guys think? If you guys have the number you want to throw out there, go for it. But
well, so I like Dave Lee's perspective on things, that he basically discounts his portfolio by 70% because he knows how volatile things are. So yeah, I think that Tesla could be worth basically double its all-time high by the end of 2023, but discounted 70% back to still sub pre-split $1,200 prices.
Cool. Good.
I think it'll be somewhere between 100 and 412.
Okay.
And
Nice.
my pick today, and mark this down, is going to be 298.
By the end of 2023.
End of 2023.
Okay. I'm writing it down right now. What if you get
Mine
it
is
wrong?
between 69 and 420.
Oh, that's the right answer. I think that's the answer he was looking for. Okay.
I don't have a
finally got
financial
it.
model, unfortunately. I'm not blessed with the financial background and knowledge yet, but I am learning. I would say like 2023 is a good like minimum target, but I'm more looking even further out. But I mean, yeah, I don't have numbers to crunch for that one.
Well, since you guys are throwing out the numbers and I said it's not valuable, I'm gonna freaking throw up mine. Damn it. I do have a model. 657. Big number. But that's if they at a PE of 58 on, let's see, on $33 billion of net income. That's
From
all
your
I'm saying.
lips to God's ears.
Yeah, let's see if it happens.
What
Next
if
question.
can you change? Well, I guess we can do it, but it's a little over $300 if you set a PE of 30 instead of 58.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Aaron, given V3 charging curve, 500 miles on 93% charge. Oh, just like a whole math exercise. It would mean a peak charging rate of 2100. Why do they only say 1 megawatt plus then? I don't know how to answer this question.
So I was thinking about this yesterday. That was one of the things that I was trying to tease out with Nick on the stream. Yeah, if they're saying it's a 1 megawatt charger and they're saying that they can get 70% of charge, like that should mean that the max charge, like if it was a perfect charging curve and you've got a 1 kilowatt hour pack and you can charge at 1 kilowatt hours, and you have a 1 megawatt hour, a 1 megawatt hour battery pack. So that's 1,000 kilowatt hours, and you can charge at 1 megawatt. Then it should take you an hour to charge if you can put all of the energy from the charger into the battery. But you can't because there's a charging curve, and so that would imply that it would take whatever 70% of 60 minutes is to get to that 70% charge at the 1 megawatt charging rate. And so if you're saying that you can get that in 30 minutes, which is too short, then yeah, you're charging it over that 1 megawatt rate. So I don't understand exactly how that works. It seems like there's definitely some specs that we're not getting.
Hans is a
that-
smarter person than me that can go through those numbers. I mean, just from reading it and like going through the math, to me it makes sense. But I'm going to derail us a little bit because I can't fully explain it, and just say my jaw dropped when they said that was coming to Cybertruck and that it would be in future vehicles. And Stephen Mark Ryan highlighted that the word vehicles is important, not just cars, because obviously Cybervan and then maybe the robotaxi van would be applicable. I'm wondering if that means that for like a robo-taxi, like a 2-seater or something smaller, if that would not be applicable for the 1 megawatt charging setup. But yeah, that's a whole nother topic.
Also boats and eVTOLs.
Planes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good point. Good point.
But what was it? Water-cooled charging? Did they say that was in something else in the presentation?
MV4 charging.
They said that
Oh
the
my God.
Cybertruck would be able to use that same cooled connector.
Yeah. And then to have whoever's going to figure out that question from Aaron, but to also extrapolate the time it would take to charge a Cybertruck, like that would be super cool to understand what the implications
as
of
long
that
as the pack
are.
can accept that type of charge rate. Theoretically, the way I'm thinking about it is 0 to 80% in like 5 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes. But then it becomes a question of, can the pack accept that much? Like what kind of chemistry do you need to be able to do that, right?
What's the percentage of regeneration you can get while driving?
I think effectively like what was it, like 20 kilowatts, 25, something like that? Maybe
Yeah,
less?
I'm not sure. I think Corey was talking about getting 90% efficiency on your regen. So
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. I thought it was closer to 70, but still, I mean, either 70 to 90%, but dang.
Okay.
Maybe it's different for bigger trucks too. Like if the semi has a different percentage, because my brother owns a Bolt with a B, and I think his was lower, but it's a non-Tesla. And then to also, while we're going down rabbit holes, to talk about or think about if Tesla did redesign the trailer portion of a semi, what that would look like with solar batteries and that kind of stuff. Obviously, they've prototyped that, or not prototype, but imagine that with a Cybertruck, and that would be a smaller trailer type thing, which I would also be interested in. But at the 53, 57 foot scale, what that would look like.
Yeah. All right, let's do the next one here. Let's do a couple more. High school question. I believe Tesla is late with announcing new factories because they know the robotaxi variant will ramp up crazy fast. Is Gigafactory with 3 or 4 million robotaxis a year possible? This is a great question. So one of the things we talked about on yesterday's stream, and Jason sort of brought this up earlier today about the announcement of new Gigafactories. I do think the Gigafactory announcement is going to be reserved for when they unveil robotaxi because of exactly what you just described. The amount of volume they're going to be able to put out from a single factory for that product, it's going to be at least 2x of the existing sort of like high number. So if we take Austin, or let's even take Fremont, they make roughly 250 to 300,000 Model Ys a year out of that facility, probably, maybe more. And if you're cutting the new sort of car here, the new product, in half of number of parts, half the cost, that you already imply that you're going to be able to do 2x the number of units per say square foot of a factory, but the manufacturing processes that you'll delete and introduce that are going to be much more efficient is probably closer to a 3x or 4x improvement in net number of units. Because if you take Model S and X and you take Model 3 and Y, Model 3 and Y are half the cost, call it, of Model S and X, but it's like 4 to 6x the volume of that product. So when you take half the cost of those products again, you can probably get to that same multiplier effect. Yeah,
I don't think without a new factory unrelated to robotaxi that we can reach the numbers. Because to me, the ramp up at both Austin and Berlin have been slow, in my opinion. And I'm estimating that and this is my numbers for whatever it's worth. I'm estimating if you collectively, excluding Cybertruck, that Austin and Berlin will produce about 700,000 units in 2023. And so to get to like 5 million, and it's taken, that's 2 years, about basically 2 years in. That's a 2-year ramp. And so you have to build out a factory. Might take 2 years to build the factory. Then you got to re-ramp that new factory. And unless you get new factories online just to do the 3s and the Ys and whatever else, you're just not going to get to the numbers, irrespective of the robotaxis.
So the counterpoint on that is just battery supply, I think, is still the limiting factor, even for Austin and Berlin. And if the new platform uses half the batteries, then you can grow unit deliveries at a faster rate given the same increase in battery supply, or the same rate of increase of battery supply.
Noah, did you have a thought?
Yeah, I was actually kind of curious. I don't know if this would actually happen, but there was a wild card thought of like, what if the Model 3 became the $25,000 car? Like, basically they eliminated. No, you think they'll still keep it?
No way.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's going to make way more sense to do a ground up solution, because Model 3, that was like the first generation of a mass market car.
Yeah.
And I mean, you compare the Model 3 to the Model Y, and the Model 3 is a giant wasteful a thing that just happens to be incredible when it comes to driving dynamics and the infotainment and all that stuff. So yeah, it's going to be 100% a different platform.
They want to use a lot less material. It's going to be smaller in footprint in every way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you need to do a new platform to keep the margins.
True. Yeah. All right, let's do one more. Last one. Who's going to be the lucky question? Da-da-da-da. Ross. Twitter, he's given himself 2 years runway, allowing 0 advertisers, and the reason he's been so active controversial is to keep it relevant and demonstrate how a town square should be. Agree. Yeah, well, let me think about that. He's given himself 2 years runway. Does anybody have any thoughts?
I think he acts more impulsively than that, so I wouldn't conclude.
He hasn't planned that far ahead.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's been extrapolated or calculated. 2-year runway, 0 advertisement. Like, I mean, it sounds like it would make sense. I don't know about if his behavior is to play into that. I mean, I think Elon understands media in some sense of publicity. All press is good press in some ways. And it kind of one plays into the other in that sense. But I just think people are kind of, like rooting for their favorite team, so to speak, or like their sideline audience members yelling and trying to have an opinion on something that they don't fully understand. And I think Elon's basically changing the business model of Twitter, and people don't get that or don't see that yet. But eventually I think something will snap, and they'll see that difference when things are going the other way.
Plus,
I think I agree. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Jason.
He'll kill you if you don't let him.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Hans. I think I don't agree with the premise also of 0 advertising, because I don't think that's the model. I mean, I was reading yesterday, and I don't know if it's true, but that they're offering discounts to get advertisers back. We saw the picture of Elon at Apple Park, kind of making nice with Tim Cook, and Apple is an advertiser besides obviously the app, but it's dual purpose. So I think that he'd like to keep advertisers. He'd just like to keep more control over it.
Yeah.
That's a topic you can unpack a lot, that conversation between Tim Cook and Elon. But sorry, go ahead, Hans.
Well, I was going to say, I do agree that I think a lot of his tweets are much more impulsive than they are really thought out and well planned. But there is part of me that I've been wondering if he's kind of running a semi-Donald Trump playbook, where he's creating a lot of controversy and saying a lot of things that stir up a lot of media attention, because I like with Twitter user growth being what it has been, I think a lot of that is driven by all of the negative attention that he's gotten. And I think there's also some truth to him wanting to lead the way on, like, I want Twitter to be a place where people can come and say dumb and controversial things and not necessarily have that be the end of them. And so I do think that that is definitely a factor. I would agree with that dimension of the question.
I think the interesting thing is Elon's approach lends itself to this outcome. I think that's what's happening here, is that somebody who appears to just want truth everywhere in everything he does is going to ruffle a lot of feathers when truth isn't the primary vector that's used by these businesses to generate profit. And so it's naturally going to create a lot of friction and craziness. But as far as advertising goes, he has made it very clear that he wants to create hyper-targeted ads that become content, not necessarily like an ad experience, which to me says that it's kind of sort of echoing the point of the rest of the panel, that it's very much part of the strategy and him giving himself runway for it to ensure that even with zero advertisers, he could go like 1 to 2 years with like literally zero income. It's just a prudent business decision. That's how I'm trying to like rationalize it in my head here, that if something were to go really, really bad, they would still survive. But with all the cuts he's made and the amount of efficiency he's going to take out of that business, they can probably go zero advertiser revenue and blue check marks and be okay with probably like 5 years, to be completely honest, if they really wanted to. But I don't think that's going to be the case. He's going to innovate really quickly, and that platform is going to become basically the gold standard of social media in the next year or two. So that's how I'm thinking about it.
I think he's thinking in like 2 or 3 quarters maybe to be profitable again. I think he actually said that on the call, not 2 years.
Plus, he's got lenders, and the lenders won't be happy if things aren't looking sweet because they don't want to be stuck.
Yeah. And you think about like as of late, and we'll do one bonus question after this. There's a bonus question queued up by producer wife here. Reed Hastings from, oh my God, face reveal. Whoa. What was it? Reed Hastings, the Netflix CEO, the head of JP Morgan, all these people came out and they have given very open props to Elon, these like quote unquote titans of industry. And I feel like that's probably echoed by most, if not all, people that are in a position to be able to help Tesla or Elon or Twitter in a financial way or in any other way. So like Jason's point is supreme here, is that regardless of what happens, the dude's going to have a backing. And he's going to probably win in the end of it because of that backing. Go ahead, Hans.
Yeah, I think that he's definitely trying to open the Overton window. And, you know, that's one of the things that has happened on Twitter, social media in general, but Twitter specifically, was you just weren't allowed to talk about a lot of specific things. And so in order to expand that back out, it's going to ruffle a lot of feathers. It's going to be controversial. There's not a way to allow people to say things that they weren't allowed to say before without it upsetting some people.
Yeah. We got blurry Jason. I like it. Try putting your hand in front of the camera to regain the focus, and then move it towards your face. Yeah. All right. Maybe that's what he really looks like. Maybe he's just blurry in real life. Let's go ahead and pull up the bonus question here. Did you guys guess Q1 deliveries? Ooh, okay. We didn't, but I can throw some numbers out there. So if we're assuming 450 in Q4, that's what I'm assuming, is 450 in Q4. That's with a probably almost fully bramped Shanghai, call it, at 1.1 per year. And then Fremont's probably going to be maxed. But then Austin and Berlin are going to continue ramping in Q1. And if the subset of the 450, let's say, if the weekly rate out of Berlin is 5,000, so that's 5 times 13 weeks in a quarter, that's what, 65. And Austin is about the same, so that's, call it 130, 140. let's say that grows by 30% if Q1. So you add another 40,000. Let's call it 40,000 additional cars in Q1. Then that means that Q1 is probably going to be around 490 to 500,000. So that's my guess for Q1. What do you guys think? 500,000.
I like that extrapolation. I was going to say specifically, didn't like 100 or so Chinese engineers come over to Fremont to try to revamp the factory and make it more efficient? So
That's right.
maybe we'll see more output in Q1 for that specific factory. I'm also curious to see and track the target ramp for Berlin and Austin. Like if they're targeting 500,000 or 1 million vehicles a year, how far into that ramp we are, and if that's going to continue to grow on that same pace. That will help inform Q1 of what those numbers would look like. But the ultimate question, I guess, would be, do we feel like Q1 will finally beat the Q4 records? Because usually it drops back
100%.
down post Q4, right?
I'll beat it.
Yeah, I mean, the EV tax credit will be kicking in for that quarter, right?
Exactly.
So that, I would guess that first month in particular, that should be like a crazy month. People who didn't buy in the fourth quarter or waiting, they're all probably going to try to buy in the first month.
Yeah. Pure EV manufacturers will experience no drop off in Q1, while everyone else is their sales are going to be cut in half because of the seasonality of gas cars. But that doesn't apply to EVs because EVs are eating into ICE cars. Go ahead, Hans. Oh, good. Oh, sorry. I thought you wanted to say something. My bad. Okay. All right. Let's call it there. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Hans. Thank you, Noah. Oh, did you have something to say, Hans? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, I was just trying to do the math on what I thought that they were going to be. Probably somewhere between 5 and 510 is my guess. And that's real simple. Just taking 12.5% growth over Q4, which is 50% divided by 4.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for making it a lot easier than I did. I appreciate that. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Hans. Thank you, Noah. Thank you, Jason. Really appreciate you. Jason went from masked finance professional to blurry in real life. It's amazing. Your transformation abilities are great. And of course, producer wife, thank you so much in the background. Give yourself a round of applause. You did a great job today. There you go. Hit the like button if you're enjoying the stream. If you want to thank producer wife, thank you everybody in the comments for us spending the last couple hours with us. Had such a great time. Very eventful week, and hopefully this stream made it a little bit easier to digest some of what's happened. So with that, we'll see you on the next one. We'll be back on Monday. Take it easy, everybody. Thank you, Hans. Thank you, Noah. Thank you, Jason. We'll see you around. Bye, everybody. Mwah.